The task is completed.
The first punch landed hard enough to split her lip. I saw it from 30 meters away. The violin case slipped from the young woman's hand and crashed against the concrete. The sound was sharp, louder than it should have been, as if something inside had broken. People looked. Nobody moved. The harbor was crowded that evening. Cargo workers were finishing their shifts. Food vendors were shouting prices. Trucks rolled across the loading lanes. Yet when four young men surrounded a girl barely in her 20s and shoved her against a rusted fence, the crowd suddenly became blind. One of them grabbed her wrist. Another kicked the violin case. The girl tried to pull free. "Let go of me." The gang leader laughed. "Then pay your debt. I don't owe you anything. You owe plenty." The second punch knocked her to the ground. Something twisted inside my chest. Not because violence was new. Not because I was shocked. Because I recognized one of the men. And that meant trouble far bigger than a street fight. I stood beside my cart filled with scrap metal, old wires, and broken machine parts. To everyone around me, I was just another old scavenger. 68 years old. Gray hair. Worn jacket. Calloused hands. Invisible. That was exactly how I preferred it. But sometimes the past refuses to stay buried. The gang leader's face dragged me back 20 years. Back to a night filled with gunfire. Back to a promise I had hoped never to remember again. The young woman screamed. The memory vanished. Reality returned. And I knew I had a choice. Walk away. Or make a phone call. A phone call I had not made in almost 7 years. One call. That was all it would take. The harbor district stretched along the eastern edge of the city. Most people avoided it after dark. Container yards. Warehouses. Abandoned factories. The kind of place where things disappeared. Sometimes cargo. Sometimes people. I made my living collecting discarded metal from repair sites and shipping yards. The work was dirty. The pay was small, but gave me freedom. Nobody asked questions. Nobody paid attention. That suited me. The young woman tried to crawl toward her violin case. One of the gang members stepped on it. Crunch. The sound made her freeze. For a second, I thought she might cry. Instead, anger flashed across her face. "Get away from it." The gang member laughed. "You care more about this thing than your own life." She lunged toward him. He shoved her backward. She hit the concrete hard. Blood stained her sleeve. The crowd continued watching. A truck driver looked away. A vendor lowered his head. Nobody wanted involvement. That was how fear worked. It spread quietly, until everyone became part of it. I pushed my car forward. The wheels rattled. The gang leader noticed me. His expression immediately turned cruel. "Old man." I stopped. "Move along." I looked at the girl. She was trying to stand. One eye was swelling shut. Her violin case lay broken beside her. The gang leader followed my gaze. "Family member?" "No." "Then mind your own business." The others laughed. One of them kicked my cart. Metal pieces scattered across the pavement. The crowd chuckled nervously. The old scavenger had become entertainment. I looked down at the spilled scrap, then at the young man. For a moment, nobody spoke. The leader smirked. "You deaf?" I bent down and picked up a twisted copper pipe. Slowly, carefully. Then I placed it back into the cart. The leader laughed again. "That's right." His voice rose. "Know your place. Know your place." Funny phrase. People always said it to those they thought powerless. They rarely considered whether they understood the person's place at all. The young woman stared at me. Perhaps she expected help. Perhaps she already knew none was coming. Her eyes carried that exhausted look. The look of someone who had asked for help too many times. The look of someone who had learned disappointment. I recognized it, because I had worn the same expression once. Many years ago, before everything changed. The gang leader grabbed her arm again. "Last chance." She glared at him. "I'm not signing anything." His smile vanished. That interested me. Not paying money. Not handing over property. Signing. That changed things. The leader leaned close. "You think anyone is coming?" She remained silent. His hand rose again. I pulled a small phone from my pocket. Old. Cheap. The screen was scratched. The leader noticed. "So you're calling the police?" The others burst out laughing. One spat onto the ground. "Tell them we're terrified." The leader stepped toward me. I pressed a number. Only one. Not police. Not emergency services. A direct line. The call connected after a single ring. I heard breathing. Nothing else. The same as always. I spoke calmly. "Pier 17. Silence." Then a voice. Deep. Controlled. Confirmed. Confirmed. Another pause. Ooh. I looked at the gang leader. For the first time, I noticed uncertainty in his eyes. Perhaps he finally sensed something wrong. I answered. Zhao Ren's people. The voice on the phone became cold. Stay there. The line disconnected. 3 words. That was all. The gang leader frowned. Who was that? I slipped the phone away. He stared, then laughed. Whatever game you're playing, old man, it's over. Maybe. Maybe not. The next 5 minutes would decide. The girl sat against the fence. Her breathing was uneven. Blood stained her lower lip. The crowd gradually lost interest. Some people walked away. Others remained. Waiting. Humans love spectacle, especially when they believe there would be no consequences. The gang members resumed, arguing with the young woman. Bits of conversation drifted toward me. Contract. Transfer. Inheritance. Shares. Interesting words. Far too interesting for street criminals. The leader produced documents. Several pages. Official stamps. Legal formatting. The girl immediately shook her head. No. His jaw tightened. You don't get a choice. I do. No. His smile returned. You really don't. Something larger was happening. Something involving money. Power. Ownership. The girl was not simply a random victim. I suspected she knew it too. One of the gang members suddenly grabbed her hand and tried forcing a pen between her fingers. She struggled. People watched. Nobody intervened. Then headlights appeared. Several black vehicles entered the harbor. Fast. Too fast. The engines echoed between warehouses. The crowd immediately noticed. The gang members turned. The leader's expression changed. Confusion. Then concern. Then fear. The vehicles stopped. Doors opened. Men stepped out. Not gangsters. Not police. Something else. Disciplined. Professional. The kind of men who moved with purpose. 8 of them. Then 10. Then more. The harbor fell silent. One man emerged from the center vehicle. Tall. Dark suit. Silver hair. Expensive watch. The moment I saw him, I sighed. 7 years. 7 years since our last conversation. Yet he looked almost unchanged. He spotted me instantly. His expression shifted. Not surprise. Recognition. Then respect. A dangerous thing. Respect draws attention. And attention creates questions. The silver-haired man walked directly toward me. Nobody blocked his path. Nobody dared. The gang leader suddenly looked pale. Very pale. The young woman stared in confusion. The crowd began whispering. I knew exactly what they were seeing. A wealthy executive crossing an entire harbor to meet an old scrap collector. It made no sense. The silver-haired man stopped in front of me. Then he bowed. Not deeply, but enough. The harbor went completely silent. The gang leader looked as if his soul had left his body. The executive spoke. Sir. I rubbed my forehead. Don't start. His lips twitched. The closest thing he ever came to smiling. You called. I did. His eyes shifted toward the gang members, instantly becoming cold. What happened? I nodded toward the girl. They were trying to force her. The executive studied the documents. Then the men. Then the young woman. Recognition flashed across his face. His expression darkened. Very dark. The gang leader took a step backward. Wait. Nobody listened. The executive extended his hand. One of his assistants immediately passed him the papers. He read them. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Then he looked up. The temperature around him seemed to drop. Who gave you these? The gang leader swallowed. No answer. The executive folded the documents. Carefully. Almost gently. Which somehow felt more frightening. Answer. The leader finally spoke. And Mr. Zhao. The moment those words left his mouth, the crowd reacted. Whispers exploded around the harbor. Everyone knew the name. Everyone. Zhao Corporation dominated half the city's shipping industry. Warehouses. Logistics. Construction. Ports. If cargo moved through the harbor, Zhao Corporation touched it somehow. The executive before us was none other than Zhao Mingyuan. Chairman. Billionaire. One of the most influential men in the province. The gang leader's legs nearly gave out. And suddenly everyone understood the same thing. The old scrap collector had called him directly. I closed my eyes. This was exactly why I disliked making that call. Questions always followed. Too many questions. Zhao Mingyuan spoke again. Slowly. What is your connection to my niece? The harbor became silent once more. The young woman blinked. What? The gang leader froze. The crowd froze. Even I felt surprised. Niece. Interesting. Very interesting. The young violinist stared at Zhao Mingyuan. He stared back. Then realization hit her. Her eyes widened. Uncle. The harbor erupted into chaos. And in that moment, I knew the situation was far bigger than anyone had imagined, including me. The people who mistake kindness for weakness often discover the difference too late. And tonight, someone was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The harbor no longer sounded the same. A few minutes earlier, it had been filled with truck engines, shouted prices, and the constant metallic noise of cargo work. Now there was only silence. Heavy silence. The kind that settled over a place when people suddenly realized they were standing in the middle of something much bigger than they had believed. The young woman looked from Zhao Mingyuan to the gang leader and then back again. Her face was pale. There was blood on her lip. One sleeve of her coat was torn. Yet somehow none of that seemed important anymore. Uncle. Her voice sounded uncertain, as if she wasn't entirely sure she had heard correctly. Zhao Mingyuan stared at her for several seconds. His normally controlled expression cracked. Only slightly. But I noticed. Most people never saw weakness in men like him. I had. Years ago. Back when he was still young enough to make mistakes. Back when money hadn't solved all his problems. His eyes moved across the injuries on her face. The bruises. The torn sleeve. The damaged violin case. His jaw tightened. You were supposed to be in Vienna. The young woman laughed bitterly. A lot of things were supposed to happen. That answer told me more than she probably intended. Family trouble. Old wounds. Distance. The kind of distance that wasn't measured in kilometers. Zhao Mingyuan took a slow breath. Then he turned toward the gang leader. The change was immediate. Like watching a door close. Whatever emotion had appeared vanished. Only cold authority remained. Who sent you? The gang leader's face had turned white. Answer. The man's voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The gang leader looked around desperately. His friends had already begun stepping backward. Cowards. Every group has them. Men who believe they're brave until consequences arrive. Then suddenly they're alone. I was hired. Hired by whom? No answer. One of Zhao Mingyuan's security men stepped forward. The gang leader immediately flinched. Interesting. That reaction wasn't fear of violence. It was recognition. He knew who these people were, which meant he probably understood exactly how serious his situation had become. The security man reached into the gang leader's jacket pocket. The leader tried to resist. A hand grabbed his shoulder. Not violently. Firmly. That was enough. Moments later, a phone appeared. The security man passed it to Zhao Mingyuan. The chairman unlocked it effortlessly. The gang leader's expression collapsed. Please. Too late. Zhao Mingyuan was already reading. Messages. Call records. Payment confirmations. Evidence. A great deal of evidence. The chairman's face grew colder with each passing second. Then he stopped. For the first time since arriving, genuine surprise appeared in his eyes. He looked at the young woman, then back at the phone, then at me. That caught my attention. Very little surprised Zhao Mingyuan. Whatever he had found mattered. The young woman noticed too. What is it? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he handed the phone to one of his assistants. Copy everything. The assistant nodded. The gang leader looked like he might faint. His knees were shaking. The crowd sensed a shift. People whispered, speculated. Some began recording videos. Others quietly slipped away. Nobody wanted to be present if the situation became even uglier. Personally, I was considering leaving myself. I had done what needed doing. The girl was safe. The rest was not my concern. At least that was what I told myself. Unfortunately, life rarely respected such decisions. Wait. The voice came from behind me. The young violinist. I stopped. Slowly turned. She was staring directly at me. Why did you help me? Simple question. Complicated answer. I looked at her damaged violin case. Then at the crowd. Then at the harbor. Because nobody else did. Her eyes narrowed. You don't know me. No. Then why care? A few years ago, I might have answered differently. I might have spoken about responsibility, justice, doing the right thing. Age changes people. Experience strips away pretty speeches. So I told the truth. Because I've seen what happens when everyone decides something isn't their problem. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She looked away first. Something in my answer had landed harder than expected. Perhaps because she understood exactly what I meant. Perhaps because she had experienced it herself. I grabbed my card, ready to leave. Then Zhao Mingyuan spoke. Stay. I sighed. Of course. Nothing was ever simple. 20 minutes later, we were sitting inside a private office overlooking the harbor. Not me. I preferred standing. The office belonged to Zhao Corporation's Harbor Administration Building. Large windows, dark furniture, expensive art. The kind of room designed to remind visitors who held power. The young violinist sat on a leather sofa. A doctor was examining her injuries. Fortunately, nothing appeared broken. The gang members had been taken elsewhere. Security, which probably meant their evening, was becoming significantly worse. Zhao Mingyuan stood beside the window, watching the harbor, thinking. Dangerous habit. When powerful men spent too much time thinking, important people usually suffered. The young woman finally spoke. You still haven't answered. The chairman turned. What question? Why are those men after me? Interesting. Very interesting. Even she didn't know. That meant she wasn't the target. She was the obstacle. A critical difference. Zhao Mingyuan remained silent. The doctor finished applying antiseptic, then quietly exited. The room became still. I already knew what was coming. Someone was about to hear a truth they didn't want. Those moments never ended well. The chairman walked toward the sofa, slowly, carefully, like a man approaching unstable ground. Your grandfather is dying. The young woman froze. No reaction. None at all. Not shock. Not sadness. Nothing. That told me everything. The wound was old. Much older than tonight. I know. Zhao Mingyuan looked surprised. You know, I received a letter. When? A month ago. The chairman stared. A month. She nodded. And you ignored it. The young woman laughed. The sound carried no humor whatsoever. Should I have rushed back? Nobody answered. She stood, picked up the damaged violin case. Her hands tightened around it. He threw my mother away. The room remained silent. He erased her from the family. Her voice shook slightly. Not from weakness. From contained anger. Then when she died, nobody came. Zhao Mingyuan closed his eyes. The reaction lasted less than a second. But I saw it. Guilt. Deep guilt. The young woman continued. And now he's dying. She looked directly at him. And suddenly family matters again. No answer came. Because there wasn't one. Not a good one. The room felt smaller. Heavier. I understood why she had stayed away. Family betrayals aged differently than other wounds. Most injuries fade. Those don't. They settle into the bones. The chairman finally spoke. There are things you don't know. The young woman immediately laughed again. A sharper laugh this time. That's always what people say. She moved toward the door. Conversation over. At least for her. Then Zhao Mingyuan said something unexpected. The inheritance isn't the reason. She stopped. The room stopped. Even I found myself paying closer attention. Because those words mattered. A great deal. The chairman walked toward his desk. Opened a drawer. Removed a folder. Thick. Old. Worn at the edges. The kind of file that had been opened many times. And regretted every time. He placed it on the desk. The young woman stared at it. Didn't move. Neither did he. Finally, he spoke. Your grandfather believes someone inside the family murdered your mother. Silence. Absolute silence. The world seemed to stop. The young woman's fingers loosened. The violin case nearly slipped. What? The word barely emerged. Zhao Mingyuan didn't repeat himself. He didn't need to. The damage was already done. I watched the color leave her face. Watch her struggle to process the sentence. Murder. Not abandonment. Not neglect. Murder. Two completely different worlds. She shook her head. No. The chairman remained still. No. Her voice rose. No. But conviction was gone. Only fear remained. The kind that appears when a person realizes impossible things may not actually be impossible. She looked at the folder. Then at him. Then back again. The room felt suffocating. I knew that feeling. The moment before a life changes forever. The moment before ignorance disappears. And once truth enters, it never leaves. No matter how much you wish otherwise. An hour later, I stood alone outside the administration building. The night air carried the smell of salt and diesel fuel. The harbor lights reflected across dark water. I prefer being outside. Too many painful conversations happen indoors. The office windows glowed above me. Inside, the young woman was reading things she probably wished didn't exist. Evidence, statements, photographs, old investigations. The past opening itself, piece by piece. I wanted no involvement. None. That was the promise I had made myself years ago. No more rescuing people. No more carrying burdens that belong to others. No more stepping into storms. Because every act of rescue teaches someone they never need to save themselves. The lesson had cost me dearly. I had learned it the hard way. Yet tonight I had made the call anyway. The realization irritated me. Perhaps age was making me soft. Or perhaps I had simply recognized something in that young woman. The same loneliness. The same stubborn refusal to surrender. A door opened behind me. Footsteps approached. I didn't need to turn around. I recognized them. Zhao Mingyuan stopped beside me. For several moments, neither of us spoke. The harbor stretched before us. Quiet. Endless. Finally, he broke the silence. "You're angry." I laughed. "You noticed. You disappeared 7 years ago. And you never answer my calls." I looked at the water. "And yet here you are." He sighed. The sound carried genuine frustration. Not something many people ever heard from him. "Why did you leave?" There it was. The question. The one he had wanted answered for years. I considered ignoring it. Instead, I spoke quietly. Because every time I helped someone, they expected more. The chairman said nothing. I continued. Then more. The harbor wind tugged at my jacket. Then even more. His expression changed slightly. Recognition. Understanding. Maybe even agreement. I wasn't sure. People become comfortable standing under another person's umbrella. I looked toward the office windows. Eventually they forget how to survive the rain. The chairman followed my gaze. Inside that room sat a young woman whose life had just changed forever. A young woman who would soon need to decide whether she wanted truth or peace. The problem was simple. She couldn't have both. And deep down, I suspected she already knew it. Far above us, a light switched off. Then another. Then another. The night continued. The harbor breathed. And somewhere inside that building, a secret buried for nearly 20 years was beginning to wake up. A secret powerful enough to destroy an entire family. And this time, I had a feeling nobody would be able to stop it. The first thing I did was leave. Not dramatically. Not with a speech. Not with some grand declaration about staying out of other people's problems. I simply pushed my car out of the harbor district before sunrise and headed toward the western industrial yards. The city was still waking up. Street cleaners worked beneath orange lamps. Delivery trucks rolled through empty intersections. Most people were beginning another ordinary day. For the Zhao family, however, nothing was ordinary anymore. And for the first time in many years, that wasn't my responsibility. I intended to keep it that way. The scrapyard owner looked surprised when I arrived. "You're early." I unloaded copper wiring onto the scale. "Couldn't sleep." The owner nodded. People my age often couldn't. That answer required no further explanation. The machine beeped. Weight confirmed. Payment calculated. Simple. Predictable. I preferred predictable. Life became easier when your biggest concern was whether a pile of metal contained enough copper to justify carrying it. No family wars. No inheritance battles. No buried crimes. No billionaires. Unfortunately, peace rarely lasted. By noon, my phone rang. I stared at the screen, then sighed. Zhao Mingyuan. Again. I rejected the call. 5 minutes later it rang again. Rejected. 10 minutes later. Again. Rejected. The fourth attempt arrived less than a minute afterward. Persistent. Very persistent. I finally answered. "What?" Silence greeted me for several seconds. Then Zhao Mingyuan spoke. "I need your help." "No." The response came instantly. Automatic. Like breathing. "No. You heard me." The chairman sounded genuinely irritated. An unusual experience. Most people spent their lives trying not to irritate him. I had reached an age where such concerns no longer mattered. The situation is becoming complicated. Good luck. I moved in the call. His next sentence stopped me. Someone broke into the family archives. My hand froze. Not because I cared. Because timing mattered. Very much. The investigation had barely begun. Yet someone was already destroying evidence. That meant one thing. Whoever feared the truth was paying attention. I remained silent. The chairman continued. Security footage was erased. Interesting. Documents disappeared. More interesting. The person responsible knew exactly where to look. That was the most interesting detail of all. Because random criminals don't know where old secrets are hidden. Family members do. Employees do. Trusted people do. Which narrowed the list considerably. I leaned against a rusted container. The afternoon wind carried dust through the yard. What did they take? Another pause. Then, everything related to Mei Zhao, the violinist's mother. I closed my eyes. Of course. The game had begun. Someone was moving. Fast. Far faster than expected. Yet none of this changed my answer. Still not my problem. The chairman sighed heavily. You're impossible. Correct. I ended the call. That evening, I sat alone beside the harbor seawall. A paper cup of tea rested beside me. Fishing boats drifted across dark water. The city lights shimmered beyond them. Quiet. Peaceful. At least on the surface. My phone buzzed. A text message. Not from Zhao Mingyuan. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. Then I opened it. Thank you for helping me. No signature. None required. I knew exactly who sent it. A second message followed. I found something. That got my attention. I stared at the screen. Several moments passed. Then another message appeared. Can we meet? I should have said no. A sensible man would have. An intelligent man would have. Unfortunately, curiosity has ruined many intelligent men, including me. I replied. Where? The answer came immediately. Pier 17. The same place. The same harbor. The same location where everything had started. Night settled over the waterfront. Cargo cranes towered overhead like metal giants. The harbor never truly slept. Somewhere in the distance, machinery hummed continuously. I arrived 10 minutes early. Old habits. The young violinist arrived 5 minutes later. She looked different. Not physically. The bruises remained. The cut on her lip was still healing. No, something else had changed. Her eyes. The uncertainty was gone. In its place stood determination. Dangerous determination. The kind born after discovering a terrible truth. She carried a backpack and her damaged violin case. I nodded toward it, still using that. Her hand brushed across the cracked surface. It still works. Fair answer. We stood silently for a moment. Then she handed me a folder. I didn't take it. She frowned. What's wrong? I don't want it. It's evidence. Exactly. Frustration flashed across her face. For the first time, she looked her age. Young. Impatient. Exhausted. You really don't want involvement? No. She laughed. A short, disbelieving sound. You called one of the most powerful men in the province. I made one phone call. That's involvement. No. I sipped tea. That was annoyance. Despite herself, she almost smiled. Almost. Then the seriousness returned. I need advice. No. Why? Because advice becomes responsibility. Her expression tightened. You always answer like that. Usually. She shook her head. You're frustrating. Frequently. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, she opened the folder herself. Photographs. Documents. Handwritten notes. Copies. Many copies. Smart. Never trust originals. Especially when someone is actively destroying evidence. She pointed at one page. This was hidden. I glanced down. Medical records. Old ones. Very old. Dated nearly 20 years earlier. The young woman lowered her voice. My mother's death wasn't classified as an accident. I looked up. That was new. Very new. The official report was changed. Now that was dangerous. Someone altering government records required influence. Connections. Money. Power. Not something ordinary families accomplished. She pointed at another page. Witness statements disappeared. Then another. 3 investigators were reassigned. Interesting. The puzzle pieces were beginning to align. And I didn't like the picture they were creating. The young woman stared at the documents. My grandfather spent 18 years searching. Her voice softened. He never stopped. That surprised me, because it contradicted everything she believed, everything she had been told. Everything she had carried for years. A man does not spend 18 years searching for answers if he simply doesn't care. She knew that too. The realization hurt. I could see it. Sometimes truth heals. Sometimes it merely replaces one wound with another. She sat beside the seawall, silent, thinking. Finally she asked, "What if I'm wrong?" A rare question. An honest one. Most people seek certainty. Very few admit uncertainty. I considered my answer carefully, then sat beside her. The problem with old pain. I watched the dark water. Is that it becomes part of your identity. She listened quietly. If the story changes, you have to change too. The harbor wind blew strands of hair across her face. She didn't move them. That's difficult. Yes. How do you do it? I laughed softly. When I figure it out, I'll tell you. That earned a small smile. A real one this time. The first I'd seen. Then her phone rang. The smile vanished immediately. She checked the screen. Frowned. Answered. Hello. Silence followed. Then confusion. Then alarm. She stood suddenly. What happened? My attention sharpened. The young woman's face drained of color. When? A pause. Then. I'm coming. The call ended. She looked at me. For several seconds, she couldn't speak. Finally, my grandfather collapsed. The Zhao estate sat on a hill overlooking the city. Massive gates. Private security. Gardens large enough to qualify as parks. Money announces itself in many ways. Space is one of them. We arrived shortly before midnight. I wasn't sure why I came. Perhaps because she asked. Perhaps because I knew she shouldn't face it alone. Perhaps because despite everything, I was already involved. The truth annoyed me. Inside the estate, chaos reigned. Doctors moved through hallways. Family members argued. Lawyers arrived carrying briefcases. Security personnel monitored entrances. Nobody noticed me, which suited me perfectly. Invisible was comfortable. The young violinist disappeared toward the medical wing. I remained behind, observing, listening, doing nothing. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is nothing. The philosophical line returned unexpectedly. Because action felt easy. Interference felt easy. Standing aside while others made their own choices. That was difficult. Very difficult. Especially when you could already see disaster approaching. A voice interrupted my thoughts. You're the harbor man. I turned. A young woman stood nearby. Late 20s. Professional suit. Sharp eyes. Observant. Far too observant. I've been called worse. To my surprise, she laughed. I'm Lin Shui. She extended a hand. I ignored it. After an awkward second, she lowered it. Unoffended. Interesting. Most people dislike being ignored. This woman simply adapted. What do you do? I asked. Internal auditor. That immediately caught my attention. Because internal auditors discover things other people desperately want hidden. She lowered her voice. Someone inside the family is terrified. I wasn't surprised. She continued. I think I know why. Now I was. Lin Shui glanced around carefully, ensuring nobody listened. Then she handed me a flash drive. I stared at it, already irritated. What is this? Evidence. Of course it was. What else could it possibly be? I don't want it. Too bad. She placed it into my hand. Bold. Unexpectedly bold. Then she delivered the sentence that changed everything. I found offshore transfers. My expression remained calm. Inside, alarm bells rang. Offshore accounts meant money. Large money. Hidden money. The kind linked to serious crimes. How much? She swallowed. Over $80 million. The hallway suddenly felt colder. Far colder. $80 million wasn't theft. It wasn't fraud. It wasn't greed. It was something much larger. Much uglier. And if that money connected to the death from 18 years ago, then the Zhao family wasn't hiding a tragedy. They were hiding a conspiracy. Before I could respond, shouting erupted from the medical wing. Everyone turned. Doctors rushed past. Family members followed. Panic spread instantly. And in that confusion, I noticed something else. A man slipping quietly through a side corridor. Leaving. Not approaching the crisis. Escaping it. His face looked familiar. Very familiar. Then recognition struck. He was one of the names from the stolen archive records. One of the people connected to the original investigation. One of the men who should never have been inside this estate tonight. The moment he realized I had recognized him, he ran. And suddenly I knew. The secret buried for 18 years wasn't dead. It was alive. It was watching. And had just realized someone was getting close. The man ran. Not the panicked sprint of someone startled by unexpected attention. Not the confused reaction of a guest who found himself in the wrong hallway. No. This was the run of a man who already knew he was guilty. The moment our eyes met, he understood exactly what I had recognized. And he fled. The corridor exploded into movement. Doctors pushed equipment toward the medical wing. Security guards shouted instructions. Family members crowded around doorways. Nobody paid attention to one middle-aged man slipping through a side exit. Nobody except me. For half a second, I considered following. Then I stopped. That old instinct again. The urge to step forward. To take control. To solve the problem. For years I had lived that way. Every crisis became my responsibility. Every disaster became my burden. Every broken situation somehow landed on my shoulders. The result had never been worth the cost. Sometimes stepping aside is wisdom. Sometimes it's cowardice. The difference isn't always obvious. I watched the man disappear through the exit doors. Then I turned toward Lin Shui. She had seen him too. Our eyes met. She understood immediately. Who was that? A mistake. What? I slipped the flash drive into my jacket. A man making a very expensive mistake. Before she could ask further questions, another voice interrupted. Grandfather is awake. The young violinist stood at the end of the hallway, breathing hard. Her face had gone pale again. Not from fear, from emotional exhaustion. The last 24 hours had dismantled nearly everything she believed about her family. And the process wasn't finished. Not even close. The private medical suite occupied an entire wing of the estate. Money buys comfort. Wealth buys privacy. The Zhao family possessed enough of both. The old man lay in a hospital bed positioned beside enormous windows overlooking the city. Medical equipment hummed quietly. Heart monitors blinked steadily. Several doctors remained nearby, ready, waiting. The first thing that struck me wasn't how weak he looked. It was how alert he remained. His body had aged. His eyes hadn't. Sharp eyes. Dangerous eyes. The eyes of a man accustomed to seeing what others missed. Those eyes immediately found the young violinist. For several seconds, nobody spoke. 20 years of separation stood between them. 20 years of anger, regret, misunderstanding. Neither seemed certain how to cross that distance. Finally, the old man broke first. You're taller than your mother. The young woman froze. One sentence. That was all it took. Not an apology. Not an explanation. Just a simple observation. Yet I watched tears appear instantly in her eyes. Because those words carried something deeper. Memory. Recognition. Love. Not enough to erase the past, but enough to complicate it. The old man's gaze softened. Only slightly. I wasn't sure I'd see you again. Silence followed. Heavy silence. The kind no outsider should witness. Family wounds have their own language. Their own rules. Their own gravity. Eventually the young violinist stepped closer. Not fully. Not enough. But closer. What happened to my mother? Straight to the point. No hesitation. No detour. The old man closed his eyes. The question clearly hurt. Perhaps because he had spent 18 years asking it himself. When he opened them again, he looked toward Zhao Mingyuan. His son understood immediately. The room began emptying. Doctors left. Assistants left. Security left. Eventually only 5 people remained. The old man. The young violinist. Zhao Mingyuan. Lin Shui. And me. I was fairly certain I shouldn't have been included. Nobody seemed interested in my opinion. The old man spoke quietly. My daughter was murdered. No one interrupted. He continued. I knew it the day they brought me the report. His voice remained steady. Controlled. A man who had repeated these thoughts thousands of times. The evidence never made sense. The young violinist listened carefully. Every word mattered. Every detail. Every memory. The old man looked toward the city skyline. Your mother was careful. His eyes grew distant. Remembering. Too careful. A faint smile appeared. The first one. Brief. Painful. She used to annoy people. The young violinist almost smiled. Almost. What? Because she never accepted easy answers. The old man's expression darkened. Then one day she died. The room fell silent again. Even the heart monitor seemed quieter. Officially, it was an accident. He laughed bitterly. Unofficially, his hands tightened against the blanket. Someone became very wealthy. My attention sharpened. Money. Again. The same direction. The same shadow. The same scent. Lin Shui noticed it too. I could tell. Her posture changed slightly. Professional instincts activating. The old man continued. 3 months after her death, several overseas accounts suddenly appeared. The flash drive in my pocket suddenly felt heavier. Much heavier. The old man's eyes narrowed. I found pieces. Fragments. Clues. Enough to know something happened. His voice dropped lower, but never enough to prove who. The young violinist finally asked the obvious question. Who do you suspect? The room became still. Very still. The old man answered. I don't know. I believed him. That was the problem. After 18 years, he still didn't know. Which meant whoever orchestrated everything had been exceptionally careful. Or exceptionally powerful. Possibly both. The meeting ended shortly after midnight. Nobody had found answers. Only more questions. That often happens when truth begins surfacing. People imagine revelations bring clarity. Usually they bring confusion first. Outside, the estate gardens were quiet. Moonlight covered the walking paths. The young violinist sat alone beside a fountain, holding the damaged violin case. Again, always the case. Interesting. I approached slowly. She didn't look up. How bad is it? She asked the question without explanation. I knew what she meant. The case. No. Her voice sounded tired. My family. That was harder. Much harder. I sat beside her. For several moments I watched the water, thinking, choosing words carefully. Finally I answered. I've seen worse. She laughed softly. Not because it was funny. Because the answer sounded exactly like something I would say. That's not comforting. It wasn't meant to be. A pause. Then, do you think my grandfather is telling the truth? Good question. Important question. The answer mattered. I considered it. The old man believes what he's saying. She stared at the fountain. That's not the same thing. No, it isn't. Her shoulders slumped slightly. Exhaustion. Mental exhaustion more than physical. The last 48 hours had become a storm. And the storm wasn't finished. Not yet. The next morning brought disaster. Real disaster. Not emotional disaster. Financial disaster. The kind measured in headlines. I learned about it while drinking tea at a harbor food stall. Every television screen showed the same story. Zhao Corporation under investigation. The headline repeated continuously. Reporters crowded outside company headquarters. Financial analysts appeared on television. Social media exploded. The stall owner looked shocked. Everyone did. The Zhao family wasn't merely wealthy. They were untouchable. Or so people believed. Apparently someone disagreed. My phone rang. I already knew who it would be. Lin Shui. I answered. What happened? Her response arrived instantly. They leaked the accounts. That got my attention. The offshore transfers. Yes. I stood. The harbor suddenly felt much smaller. Who leaked them? We don't know. That answer bothered me. Because it meant somebody else was moving pieces. Someone outside our view. Someone who wanted pressure. Chaos. Exposure. Lin Shui lowered her voice. And that's not the worst part. What is? Silence. Then, the signatures match a Zhao family member. I stopped walking. A cold feeling settled into my chest. Not because the information surprised me. Because of what it meant. If true, the conspiracy wasn't surrounding the family. It was inside the family. And suddenly everyone became a suspect. That afternoon, the board meeting began. The largest in company history. Every major shareholder attended. Every executive. Every legal advisor. The atmosphere resembled a battlefield. I shouldn't have been there. Yet somehow I found myself sitting quietly near the back wall. Invisible. Ignored. Perfect. The room buzzed with tension. Accusations flew. Defenses followed. Lawyers argued. Executives demanded answers. Then the doors opened. Zhao Mingyuan entered. The room immediately quieted. Not completely, but enough. Power has a presence. People react to it instinctively. The chairman walked toward the front, placed a folder on the table. Then another. Then another. Evidence. A lot of evidence. His voice remained calm. Someone has been stealing from this company for 18 years. The room erupted. Executives shouted. Board members protested. Several people stood. The chairman ignored them completely. Today, he continued, that ends. The room fell silent again. Because everyone understood. This wasn't damage control. This was war. Professional war. The most dangerous kind. Zhao Mingyuan opened the first folder. Photographs. Financial records. Transfer histories. Witness statements. Proof. Years of proof. Then he spoke a name. The reaction was immediate. One executive nearly collapsed. Another went pale. Several directors stared in disbelief. And in that moment, the first villain finally emerged from the shadows. Publicly. Irrevocably. Destroyed. Truth does not create damage. It reveals where damage already exists. I watched realization spread across the room. Watched alliances crumble. Watched friendships die. Watched reputations collapse. Not because of lies. Because of facts. Simple facts. The most dangerous weapon in the world. That evening, the news spread across the city. Arrests followed. Investigations expanded. Investors demanded answers. Government agencies became involved. The pressure intensified hourly. Yet something still felt wrong. Incomplete. A puzzle piece remained missing. I felt it. Lin Shui felt it. Even Zhao Mingyuan felt it. The exposed executive had stolen money. That much was proven. But theft wasn't murder. And 18-year-old crimes don't survive that long without protection. Someone else remained hidden. Someone bigger. Smarter. More careful. The real architect. The person who had built the entire deception. Near midnight, Lin Shui arrived at the harbor. Her expression alone told me something had happened. Something serious. She handed me a document. I read the first page. Then the second. Then the third. By the fourth page, even I stopped breathing for a moment. The signature at the bottom belonged to only one person. One impossible person. One person nobody had ever suspected. One person whose involvement changed everything. Lin Shui looked at me. Her voice barely above a whisper. The executive wasn't the mastermind. I already knew. The document proved it. The real mastermind had been standing beside the investigation from the beginning. Watching. Guiding. Protecting himself. For 18 years. And when the young violinist learned the truth, it would shatter what remained of her family forever. The document stayed in my pocket for 3 days. Not because I didn't understand its importance. Quite the opposite. I understood it too well. Some truths don't merely expose criminals. They destroy foundations. Families. Memories. Entire versions of reality. Once revealed, they can never be hidden again. That was the problem. The evidence Lin Shui had found pointed toward someone nobody wanted to suspect. Someone trusted. Someone respected. Someone whose guilt would leave permanent scars. The young violinist deserved the truth. But truth carries a cost. And for the first time since this entire mess began, I wasn't certain who should pay it. The harbor continued its usual rhythm. Cargo ships arrived. Trucks departed. Workers complained about wages. Vendors sold tea. The city moved forward. It always does. No matter how dramatic a person's crisis feels, the world rarely pauses for it. I found comfort in that. Every morning I collected scrap. Every afternoon I sold it. Every evening I sat beside the seawall. Routine. Simple. Predictable. For years I had built this life intentionally. People often assume peaceful lives happen accidentally. They don't. Peace requires choices. Boundaries. Distance. The willingness to disappoint others. I had learned that lesson late. But I had learned it. My phone buzzed. A message from the young violinist. Can you meet? I stared at the screen. Then sighed. Apparently peace would have to wait. She was already sitting at Pier 17 when I arrived. The same location. The same harbor. The same place where 4 gang members had believed they owned the world. Strange how quickly circumstances change. The young woman looked healthier. Not happy. Not healed. But stronger. The bruises had faded. The cut on her lip had disappeared. Most importantly, the uncertainty in her eyes had changed. It hadn't vanished. It had matured. Pain often does that. She held 2 paper cups. One waited beside her. Without asking, I sat down and accepted it. Tea. She remembered. Interesting. For a while neither of us spoke. The water stretched before us, gray and endless. Eventually, she broke the silence. I met my grandfather again. I nodded. How was it? A faint smile appeared. Awkward. That sounds accurate. The smile widened slightly, then disappeared. He apologized. That surprised me. Old men rarely apologize. Not because they're incapable, because many spend their lives convincing themselves they have nothing to apologize for. The young violinist looked toward the water. I don't know what to do with that. I understood. An apology doesn't erase pain. Sometimes it complicates it. Hatred can be easier than forgiveness. Hatred simplifies things. People imagine forgiveness brings relief. Often it brings confusion first. She took a slow breath. I spent years believing he didn't care. Her fingers tightened around the cup. Now I know he did. A pause. But he still failed us. There it was. The real wound. Not absence. Failure. The two are very different. I considered my response carefully, then spoke quietly. People can love someone and still fail them. She stared at the harbor, thinking, processing. Eventually she nodded. Not because she fully agreed, because she understood. The Zhao investigation continued expanding. More financial records surfaced. More arrests followed. Several executives resigned. A few attempted to flee. None succeeded. The city watched everything unfold with fascination. Powerful families falling from grace always attract attention. People enjoy seeing giants stumble. Unfortunately, attention creates pressure. Pressure creates mistakes. And mistakes reveal truths. 3 days later, Lin Shui arrived at my usual tea stall. She looked exhausted. The kind of exhaustion produced by long hours and difficult discoveries. She sat across from me without invitation. Again, bold woman. You're becoming predictable. She rolled her eyes. You sound disappointed. I am. That earned a laugh. A genuine one. Then her expression became serious. The evidence is confirmed. I already knew which evidence she meant. The final evidence. The evidence connecting everything. The theft. The cover-up. The altered reports. The destroyed archives. 18 years of deception. Has Zhao Mingyuan seen it? Yes. Her answer came immediately. That caught my attention. What was his reaction? Lin Shui stared into her tea. Silence. Not surprise. Not anger. Not denial. Silence. Some reactions say more than words. I understood, because I had reacted similarly when I first learned the truth. The real mastermind wasn't merely connected to the family. He was the family. That evening, Zhao Mingyuan requested a meeting. Not a phone call. Not a message. A meeting. Which meant something important was about to happen. The chairman waited inside a private conference room overlooking the harbor. No assistants. No lawyers. No security. Just him. Interesting. I sat opposite him. The silence lasted nearly a minute. Finally he spoke. She's my sister. There it was. The truth. Spoken aloud for the first time. The mastermind. The hidden architect. The person nobody had suspected. His older sister. The young violinist's aunt. The room felt smaller after those words. Much smaller. Zhao Mingyuan rubbed his forehead. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked tired. Truly tired. Not physically. Spiritually. Like a man carrying a burden he no longer wished to carry. She did it for control. His voice sounded distant. Almost detached. As though describing someone else. At first it was money. He laughed bitterly. Then it became power. I listened quietly. There was nothing useful to say. No advice. No comfort. No solution. Some tragedies simply need witnesses. The chairman stared out the window. My sister believed my father would give everything to May. The violinist's mother. The murdered daughter. The woman who had threatened someone's ambitions simply by existing. She became obsessed. His voice hardened. People think evil arrives dramatically. A pause. It doesn't. He looked toward me. Usually it arrives one compromise at a time. I nodded. Because that was true. Most villains aren't born. They accumulate. Choice after choice. Excuse after excuse. Until eventually they no longer recognize themselves. The chairman leaned back. The arrest warrant will be issued tomorrow. The words landed heavily. Not because justice was surprising. Because of what justice would cost. Families survive many things. Murder investigations rarely make the list. The next day changed everything. The arrest became public. News stations interrupted regular programming. Reporters crowded courthouse entrances. Social media erupted. The city watched. The Zhao family endured. And the young violinist finally learned the complete truth. I wasn't present for that conversation. Intentionally. Some moments belong only to families. Later she told me what happened. Her aunt confessed. Not immediately. Not willingly. But eventually. Faced with overwhelming evidence, denial became impossible. The motive proved painfully simple. Inheritance. Control. Fear. Nothing extraordinary. Most terrible crimes emerge from ordinary emotions left unchecked. The confession shattered what remained of the old family structure. Yet strangely, it also ended something. A question. An uncertainty. An 18-year wound. For the first time, the truth existed. Complete. Visible. Undeniable. And that mattered. Even when it hurt. Weeks passed. Then months. Not through dramatic time skips. Through gradual healing. The kind that happens quietly. Almost invisibly. The young violinist remained in the city. That surprised many people. Not me. Running from pain rarely works. Eventually it catches up. She understood that. Instead of leaving, she rebuilt. Slowly. Patiently. She began performing again. Small venues at first. Then larger ones. The damaged violin case remained with her. Always. A reminder. Not of suffering. Of survival. Meanwhile, the Zhao family changed. Not perfectly. Not completely. But genuinely. The old patriarch spent more time with his granddaughter. Neither attempted to erase the past. Wise choice. Some things cannot be erased. Only acknowledged. Accepted. Carried forward. Peace begins when winning stops mattering. The thought came to me one evening while watching ships cross the harbor. For years, everyone involved had wanted victory. Control. Vindication. Recognition. In the end, none of those things brought peace. Truth did. Acceptance did. Honesty did. The young violinist eventually joined me at the seawall. A familiar habit. We watched the sunset. Neither speaking much. Comfortable silence. Rare and valuable. Finally she asked, "What are you going to do now?" I looked around. The harbor. The cranes. The water. My scrap cart. The ordinary life I'd spent years building. Then I smiled slightly. The same thing I did yesterday. She laughed. Collecting scrap? Collecting scrap. The answer seemed to satisfy her. For some reason that pleased me. The sun disappeared beneath the horizon. The city lights awakened. And for the first time since the night at Pier 17, everything felt calm. Not finished, but calm. Sometimes that's enough. Yet one final conversation still remained. One final chapter. One final meeting with the past. And after that, perhaps both of us could finally move forward. The letter arrived on a rainy morning. No return address. No company seal. No lawyer's markings. Just my name written in careful handwriting. I almost threw it away. Old habits. People generally contact me when they want something. Experience had taught me that most requests become burdens. Yet something about the envelope felt different. I opened it while sitting beneath a harbor warehouse awning. Rain tapped softly against the metal roof. Workers hurried through puddles. Ships drifted through the gray distance. Inside was a single page. A prison visitation request. And one sentence. I would like to speak with the man who made the phone call. No signature was necessary. I already knew who had written it. For several minutes, I simply stared at the paper. The harbor continued around me. Unchanged. Indifferent. The world had moved on. News stations no longer discussed the Zhao family every day. The scandal had been replaced by newer scandals. The arrests had become old news. Public attention had shifted elsewhere. That was the nature of attention. Temporary. Restless. But consequences remain long after attention disappears. The woman sitting in prison understood that now. Perhaps for the first time. My phone rang. The young violinist. I answered. "Good morning. You sound annoyed." "Accurate." She laughed. A familiar sound these days. Healthier than before. Lighter. "What happened?" I glanced at the letter. "Your aunt wants to meet." Silence. Then, "Oh." Not anger. Not surprise. Just quiet understanding. A lot had changed during the previous months. The young woman had learned difficult truths. More importantly, she had survived them. Many people assume healing means forgetting. It doesn't. Healing means remembering without being destroyed. That was what she was learning. Eventually she asked, "Will you go?" I looked toward the rain, toward the harbor, toward the life I preferred. Then I sighed. Probably. Why? Good question. A very good question. I considered it carefully. Finally I answered. Because endings matter. The prison sat on the outskirts of the city. Concrete walls, steel fences, security checkpoints. A place designed to separate people from the lives they once lived. The guards escorted me through several locked doors, then into a small visitation room. Simple table, simple chairs, nothing more. I waited. Several minutes later, the door opened. The woman entered. She looked older than her age. Not because prison had changed her, because guilt had. Guilt ages people differently. Slower, deeper. She sat across from me. Neither of us spoke immediately. The silence stretched. Finally she broke it. "You're not what I expected." I almost smiled. I hear that often. That wasn't entirely true, but it seemed appropriate. She studied me carefully, trying to understand, trying to solve something. Eventually she asked, "Why did you help her?" Interesting. Everyone always asks that question. Not how, not when, not what happened afterward. Why? The woman shook her head. Most people would have walked away. I looked at the table, then back at her. Most people already had. The answer landed. I could see it. Her shoulders lowered slightly. The woman laughed once. A sad laugh. I spent years believing power solved everything. Her gaze drifted toward the window. Money, influence, control. One by one, the words emerged. Broken pieces of an old belief. I thought if I had enough of those things, I'd finally feel safe. The room remained quiet. Eventually she looked at me again. But it never happened. No, it didn't. That much was obvious. The woman had gained everything she wanted, and lost everything worth having. The worst part, she knew it, truly knew it. There are few punishments harsher than understanding yourself too late. The conversation lasted nearly an hour. Not because it needed to, because sometimes people carry words for years, then suddenly find themselves desperate to release them. She talked. I listened. The story wasn't complicated. Very few tragedies are. Envy, fear, resentment, small emotions left unattended. Year after year, choice after choice, until eventually they became something monstrous. At one point she asked, "Do you hate me?" The question surprised me, not because it was unreasonable, because it seemed genuine. I considered the answer, then shook my head. No. She stared, confused. Why not? I looked through the reinforced glass, toward the gray sky beyond. Because the answer mattered, not just for her, for me, for everyone involved. Finally I spoke. Hate keeps people connected. The woman frowned. I continued. If I hated you, I'd still be carrying you. Understanding slowly appeared in her eyes. For the first time during the entire meeting, she looked relieved. Not forgiven. Relieved. There's a difference. A significant difference. When our time ended, she stood. The guard approached. The moment had arrived. The final moment. The last chapter. The woman paused at the door, then quietly asked, "Do you think they'll ever forgive me?" I thought about the young violinist, about Zhao Mingyuan, about the old patriarch, about the years stolen from them. Then I answered honestly, "I don't know." The woman nodded, accepting it, because some questions deserve honesty more than comfort. Then she left, and that was the end, not of the story, of her role in it. Outside, the rain had stopped. Clouds were breaking apart. Sunlight appeared through scattered openings. I stood beside the parking lot for several minutes, breathing, thinking, remembering. The past had finally closed its hand. After 18 years, the truth existed. After 18 years, responsibility had found its owner. After 18 years, silence had ended. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but sufficiently. Sometimes closure isn't beautiful. Sometimes it's simply enough. That evening I returned to the harbor. Of course I did. Where else would I go? The seawall stretched along the waterfront. Ships moved slowly across the horizon. The city glowed behind them. A familiar figure already sat waiting. The young violinist. She looked up as I approached. How did it go? I sat beside her. quietly. She nodded, as though that answer made sense. Perhaps it did. We watched the water together. The harbor had become our neutral ground, the place where everything began, the place where everything ended. After a while, she opened her violin case. Not the new one, the old damaged one. The same cracked case from Pier 17. The same case that had survived kicks, rain, blood, and chaos. She removed the violin carefully, then stood. "What are you doing?" She smiled. "Playing." The answer felt obvious. The bow touched the strings. Music drifted across the water. Soft at first, then stronger. The harbor seemed to listen. Workers slowed. Pedestrians stopped. Even the wind felt quieter. I sat silently, listening. The melody wasn't sad. That surprised me. It wasn't angry either. It felt like something else. Acceptance. The music lasted several minutes. When it ended, applause appeared from somewhere behind us. Then more. Then more. The young woman laughed. Genuinely laughed. No bitterness. No hesitation. No pain hiding underneath. Just laughter. And for the first time since I'd met her, she looked free. Truly free. Months later, people still occasionally recognized her. The violinist whose family scandal had filled headlines. The musician who stayed instead of running. The granddaughter who rebuilt something broken. But over time, those stories faded. A different story replaced them. One based on performances. Music. Talent. Work. Things she actually chose. That mattered. Very much. Meanwhile, I continued collecting scrap. Exactly as promised. Copper. Steel. Broken machine parts. Nothing glamorous. Nothing important. And that was perfectly fine. People often imagine meaningful lives must be extraordinary. I disagree. Meaning often hides inside ordinary days. A quiet cup of tea. A conversation beside the water. The absence of regret. Those things matter more than most people realize. One evening, nearly a year after the night at Pier 17, I found myself standing exactly where everything had begun. The same concrete. The same harbor lights. The same distant sound of ships. Only one thing had changed. The fear was gone. The young violinist approached, carrying her violin. She stopped beside me. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she asked, "Do you ever regret making that call?" I looked across the dark water. Thought about everything that followed. The chaos. The investigation. The truths. The consequences. The lives changed forever. Then I smiled. Small. Quiet. Honest. No. She smiled too. The harbor lights reflected across the waves. The city continued breathing behind us. Life continued moving forward, as it always does. And I realized something. The phone call had never changed everything. Everything had already been changing. The call simply forced the truth into the open. And once truth steps into daylight, the future can finally begin. The harbor wind carried the sound of distant music across the water. We stood there listening, neither rushing to leave, neither needing words. The storm had passed. The harbor remained. And beyond it waited a future no longer haunted by the past.